Hello again, it is me! And welcome back to Keffer's Worth Bovk. Look, I will come up with a better name if you guys keep watching. Today we're talking about something I've been so excited to speak about. It's been out for maybe a week now, and we've all been looking forward to it. It's just been such a beautiful wait. We're talking about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, the Sonic the Huge movie. Now just for a bit of frame of reference, as we did for the Pokemon video, I was very much a die-hard Sonic the Hedgehog fan when I was younger. I loved a lot of the Dreamcast PS2 era games. I'd played a touch of Adventure and Adventure 2 Battle, but mainly the games that I grew up with were like Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Riders, and a bit of Sonic Unleashed. That's kind of the frame of the games that I played. And it was only really a span of 5, 6, 7 years after that, so late teenage years, that I started to realize that a lot of those games weren't too great. But at the same time, I played the Gems Collection and the Mega Collection Plus, and that had the old Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles games on there. And again, only until my late teens that I realized how amazing those original games were. So a very up and down relationship with Sonic the Hedgehog as a series. But regardless, I was very much drawn into that world of Sonic and all those characters, and it was a big part of my childhood. So naturally, this movie was very interesting to me, because when they announced it, I had little to no expectations, and I heard who was behind it. Like, I'm not a big lover of the Fast and Furious franchise. To hear that there was the producers behind that didn't really tickle me in the right way, I'm gonna say that one. And then the trailer happened, and we all know how that went. But we'll get into all of that stuff a little bit later. I've got plenty of things to say about that, but I want to save that for the end of the review. For now, I just want to get into the film. Let's start talking about what I did and didn't like about it. Guys, let's crack into it. So, in this movie, of course, Sonic is an anthropomorphic hedgehog, I hope I said that correctly, from another planet who has this power of speed, and it's very exaggerated that this is a power that he has. In the games, it's kind of just like he's just really fast. They don't really make a point of it being some otherworldly thing other than he is the fastest thing alive, and his speed is impressive, but they don't make it as some otherworldly force. That's just how Sonic is. In this movie, it's very much a power that he has that makes him just book it at ridiculous speeds that you can't even see. But because he has these powers, he's being hunted by various forces of nature through his world, and for that reason he needs to run, he needs to hide out on planet Earth. And he stays there for a good period of time until one day, once again, he's caught on Earth and people start hunting him, so he knows he needs to get away, so he uses his rings, which everyone will recognize from the usual game, to create portals to different worlds. So his plan is to go to another world, but some unfortunate events happen and he loses his rings. And for that reason, he needs to team up with police officer or sheriff or Tom, played by James Marsden, who you might remember from Superman Returns, X-Men, all that nerdy stuff that I'm sure you guys have seen along with me. And yeah, they kind of go off on this road trip adventure, if you will, to get Sonic his rings back, all the whilst trying to evade Dr. Robotnik, played by Jim Carrey. Yes, Jim Carrey. And yeah, that's kind of the basis of the plot, and just moves from there. There's not really anything that I need to tiptoe around, like there's no big spoilers for the film. I don't really want to go into too much of what happens, so you can go into it blind, but that's basically it. You just follow it from there. And yeah, there are things to say about that plot line, like it is quite simple, but at the end of the day, this is a family, more oriented towards kids movie. So naturally it's going to be something as simple as that. Obviously, there are great examples of big studios like Disney and DreamWorks making these kids movies with much more happening in the plot, much more depth in terms of the characters and events that take place and emotions of everything that's happening. But at the end of the day, a good kids film just needs to be entertaining enough for a child audience and have some level of heart and some kind of lesson in there, more or less. And for all of those reasons, this movie works as a kids film. And yeah, I think a lot of the merit of this film is that it works on that level, and I think that's what it needed to do. But at the same time, This is a classic gaming character that needs to be well represented so that the people that grew up with those games, or even the kids who know these games today, can still get something out of it, which is the other area that I think it really succeeds on. It represents Sonic's character really well in terms of his most defining aspects. Sonic is very carefree, and he's got this kind of like cocky attitude to him, but I will say in this movie, it's less of the lines of just being a jerk, which in some games is a bit prevalent. But in this one, yeah, he's kind of more than just fun-loving, oh, I'm so cool character. And it's very in line with what we've come to know of Sonic. So I think fans are gonna be really happy about that, because I think what most people wanted was for them to get the character right. And Ben Schwartz playing Sonic is fantastic. It is a little bit strange how they've gone for a childish viewpoint of Sonic. Like, he's a child in this movie. Like, obviously he looks and sounds like the Sonic we know, but it's made a point that he is a child. But then you've got Ben Schwartz's voice, which is very much like an adult voice. So the two are a bit odd, but for some reason, it's just, I think the way that he plays this character and the way that the character acts and is written, the two go together so well in a way that on paper is a bit bizarre in my head, but they just blend perfectly. And I think he really nails the performance. He's got a lot of character in Sonic. He's got that spunk that Sonic needed, and I just think he did a fantastic job, and I'm keen to see more of him if they ever do more Sonic stuff in the future, which I'm sure they will. And on the topic of performances, I just want to talk about James Marsden real quick. So I think me and a lot of people were probably concerned about the whole aspect of bringing human characters into this film and making them a big part of the film. I think when you're making a film like this, unless you've got a ridiculous amount to spend on animation, that's usually the way that it's going to go. Because it grounds the film a little bit, makes it a little bit more relatable, I suppose. And obviously, it's a lot cheaper to have real-world locations and stuff like that. But for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, seeing that was very, like, you're not too sure if that's really gonna do the movie any favors. But I think that it actually works quite well. The relationship between the two characters, it's very warm, and it's very enjoyable to see these two kind of bounce off each other a little bit. And you wouldn't think so just from the idea of the film and some of the trailers, but I think a lot of that is to do with the way that James Marsden is playing this character. Like, he knows what kind of film he's in. His performance is actually fairly deep for what the character is on the surface. Like, he's a cop that feels like he's not really living up to his potential in this town because it's a very quiet town, but he's also this really nice dude. And he's like willing to help Sonic out, and he just performs it with so much warmth that I think it really makes the dynamic between the two of them work. And like, he's able to bounce off of Sonic's antics as well. Like, he's not just like, oh, what's this annoying rat doing and stuff like that. Like, there's a little bit of that early on, but he's very receptive to this character, and their relationship builds through the film, and I think that that aspect between the two of them is a lot of the reason why this movie works and why I really enjoy both of those two performances. But in terms of performances, we can't really look past Jim Carrey. Oh my goodness! So I think everyone's number one thing, if you took Sonic out of it, I think the number one thing everyone was excited for about this movie was Jim Carrey coming back to this very zany, wild performance that so many of us love from like the 90s era, whenever. And oh my god. This is like perfection Jim Carrey zaniness. Like, it's such an appropriate way to play this character, because if you've played the games, there's not a lot of depth to Robotnik. He's very, like, he's one of those kind of villains, and he's kind of a jerk a lot of the time, and he just thinks he's better than everybody. And that's exactly what they go for in this movie, and he just gives it 110%. He's completely on board with the character, and he just makes it work. The cartoony nature of this character and the cartoony way that he plays the character just blend perfectly, and I love it. And I must say, there's an end shot that everyone's seen in the credits of him with the like big brown mustache and the bodysuit, and oh, it just looks so good. I remember being a little bit concerned of his design when the trailers were coming up, but I kind of just grew into it, And I think for the way that he kind of progresses, it works. Like, it's good. You see him as this very human, evil dude, and then he just kind of becomes more cartoony over time and grows into this Eggman villain that everyone knows and loves. So I just think he knocked it out of the park. Like, I think him and Ben Schwartz were both really fantastic, but if you are a Jim Carrey fan, there's something to enjoy in this film, I must say. But anyways, those are some of the better elements of the movie that I took away. I did obviously have some issues. This movie is not perfect. I wouldn't even say it's great by any means, unfortunately. It's good enough. It's enjoyable. And that's enough to take away for me to be okay with the film. But obviously there's a lot left to be desired. So as I mentioned earlier, one of my bigger quote-unquote issues with the film is the story. It's a very basic story. It's not very eventful. I think the themes of loneliness that are in the film are very strong, but other than that, there's not a lot to it. And I get it, like for a kid's film, I guess they think that that is probably good enough. And I guess for a lot of audiences it would be, but it's not just kids that are gonna watch these films. I think that all films should really put a few more layers into it to kind of just give these stories a little bit more originality. I think we're at a point in film where so many great kids movies exist with these really deep narratives and stuff like that, that I think we kind of need to stop just assuming that things are good enough. But at the end of the day, I get what they're going for and it's acceptable, but you don't really want your film to be acceptable. That's one of the main things. There's not really much else I can say about it. I think it needed a bit more and it needed to be less paint by numbers. A similar issue that I had with Detective Pikachu. Another thing would be a lot of the kids element, like the kids movie elements. So like, there's just some little things like obviously they've got their fart humor in there, and some of the jokes are a little bit like, ugh, they don't really land. Some of the jokes are actually quite funny. I will give this movie credit. It made me laugh a lot more than I thought it would. But at the same time, there are a lot of jokes in there that just kind of fell flat. And Sonic, like, he flosses in the movie twice, which is an obvious, like, hey, kids know these things. So there's also a lot of that where it's like, oh, come on, man. You don't need to do these things to appeal to children. You got this bright and vibrant blue hedgehog on the screen who's just full of life energy and like charisma, and you don't really need all this like really graspy, hey kids like this film, you know, like it's not necessary. And that was kind of a downer. Not a big thing, I get it. Again, kids are gonna enjoy it, and I'm not the well, I guess I'm half of the target audience for this. I guess it depends on whether you consider me to be a kid. But yeah, I just think some of it could have been toned down. Like, we're not dumb. Kids know how to enjoy a movie. You don't throw that stuff at them. And the other thing, so I need to talk about the graphics a little bit and the effects. There's a little bit of weirdness with the coloring in some of it. I'll put an example from one of the trailers in the video here, but Sonic's colors kind of seem to stick out a little bit. Whenever he was in the dark, he's just kind of almost glowing, and he just looks like, he doesn't look like he's there. And that's another big thing, is there are a lot of effects and CGI creations in this film that aren't really, I don't know what the word for it is, but they're not really edited in a way that makes them look like they actually exist in the film. They kind of just look like they've been pasted onto the forefront, which is a bit frustrating, especially when the film is so well designed. You think that they would have been able to get past that. But those were my main gripes. The story being the big one that kind of took it down a peg for me. The other two things are annoying, but they're not the end of the world. I think the effects is probably more of a like thing for me. Oh, and before I forget, there's some very obvious product placement in this film. And it's really frustrating that we're still at that point, but gotta make money! Now, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and that is the design of this film. Can I just say how happy I am with how this film looks? Especially considering what we went from. So this is a big thing. Like, I think a lot of people, obviously the mass market for this, we all understood how bad that original design was. And like, seeing this final film, it's unfathomable to me that they thought that that character was a good idea. Especially considering how good everything else looks in this movie. Maybe the reason everything looks so good is because they went in that direction. Maybe it was the new team that they brought in to help with the redesign. Maybe they had something to do with it. I don't know. But it just seemed so baffling that that was ever considered. But yeah, this redesign of Sonic just looks awesome. It's like the slightest bit different from the games, but it's just so much more appreciative of that original design, and it needs to be. And that's a big thing that I think a lot of people who kind of just push this thing aside, like, okay, they redesigned it, cool, the movie's still gonna be whatever. Sure, the movie was probably still not gonna be amazing, which it wasn't, but getting Sonic's design right is such an important factor of getting this movie to work, because so much of the appeal of his character comes from how well designed he is. Everything about him just tells you what this character is. He's got the big eyebrows, he's got the finger wave, he's got the bright red kicks, and all of it tells you he's got this attitude towards him and he's all about speed. That's all you really need to know to understand this character, because those are the big things. Oh yeah, he's a heroic character. He's the main character. He's always going to be. But if you take that out, those are the two big elements of his character that you need to understand to really get Sonic and really be able to enjoy the games, and in this case, the film. And getting his design wrong is such a big issue for that reason. So I'm so happy that they redesigned it. I'm usually quite against that, because you gotta bring in the team again, or a new team if you really feel it's necessary, and just redo so much stuff, and it costs money, and who knows how long these people have got to put hours in to get it done in time, and it's just such an annoying situation. But in this case, I think it needed to be done, and good on them for actually committing to it, because it looks awesome. And of course I mentioned how at the end of the film, Eggman looks fantastic. Jim Carrey just looks perfect as the character. I never thought that he would, but he does. Awesome. And there are also some locations at the start of the film. Again, you would have seen in the trailers, we get a brief glimpse of Green Hill Zone at the very start of the film, and it looks awesome. And yeah, I just think this movie is really well done on the design point, which I don't think anyone expected when they first put that trailer out. But yeah, so that's more or less my thoughts on most aspects of the film. But the big one I want to talk about, which I think is important for this show, is to talk about what Sonic fans are gonna get out of it. So I've talked about how Sonic's character is basically spot on. And yeah, just design-wise, Sonic looks great, Green Hill Zone looks great. There are numerous references to the games and certain characters. I won't go into what does or doesn't take place in the film, but there are a lot of nods to certain things that people are gonna love. If you love the games, you're gonna love it. And obviously a lot of people have pointed out there are a lot of poses in the trailers, which I'll put in here, that have taken straight from other video games. And I think that's such an awesome attention to detail. It's just really humbling to see that they appreciate this character so much. And that's a big thing about why I like this movie, is it seems like they genuinely cared. Like, yeah, there is some easy kids movie nonsense that they've put into the film, but there seems to be some genuine love for the character. Like the credits, they've got this like pixel art credit stuff that's going on, and I think it looks fantastic, and it's just a nostalgia trip to see all that stuff. And I think if you're a Sonic fan, you're really gonna like it on that front. In terms of the movie itself, like as a whole, maybe less so. But in terms of the Sonic stuff, I think that if you're a Sonic fan, you're going to enjoy it. At the end of the day, I think the two biggest things to take away from this is Sonic as a character, Ben Schwartz's performance of him, his design, all of that, and all of this Sonic stuff that's in the film, including Robotnik's portrayal and stuff like that. All of that is going to be a big factor to why you should see the film. If you're a Sonic fan, you're going to love it. And the other big factor is obviously Jim Carrey and his performance of Robotnik. Even if you take away the character he's playing, it's just a great Jim Carrey performance if you love that 90s style of Jim Carrey acting. Like, it's just, those two things are enough for me to say you should probably see and enjoy this movie. But if you don't care about either of those things, even if it's just the Jim Carrey side of it, I don't know how much you're going to get from this. because it's not a very impactful kids film. Like, there's not much to it, and there's just so many better kids films that you could see. But I think they deliver enough on those two aspects so that if you have those things to grab onto, or if you're a child, you'll probably enjoy it as well. If you fall under the umbrella of those three things, you're going to take something out of this film and really have some fun with it. So that's my recommendation. If those things don't apply to you, maybe watch it on streaming or rent it, if that's still a thing. Anyways, just to conclude, I need to give this film a rating, so I'm going to give it 4.5 Chaos Emeralds out of 7. Thank you again so much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next millennium when they release another video game movie. I'm just kidding. I imagine the next video game movie will just be Sonic again. I will see you then, guys. Thank you again for watching, and bye-bye!